In January 1919, Boston was a city alive with winter chill and the usual hum of daily life. Snow lined the streets. Smoke rose from factory chimneys. Children played in the narrow alleys of the North End. People walked briskly along cobblestone streets. Bundled in wool coats, hats pulled low against the icy wind. Amid the ordinary cityscape, a strange and ominous sight loomed. A massive steel tank towering over the neighborhood. It was filled with 2.3 million gallons of molasses, a sticky, thick syrup that would become the source of one of America's most bizarre and deadly disasters. The tank had been hastily constructed during the war to store molasses for making alcohol and munitions. Its seams had been patched. Its steel thin. Engineers worried, but life went on. For the residents of Boston, molasses was a familiar substance, sweet and thick, used in kitchens, bakeries, and candy shops. Yet no one imagined that on a cold January day, molasses would become a deadly force. It started with small leaks. Molasses seeped slowly, dripping down the side of the tank. Workers noticed, shaking their heads with concern. But no one anticipated the catastrophe that would come. At 12:30 p.m., the unthinkable happened. The tank burst. A massive wave of sticky, brown molasses surged through the streets. It moved faster than a man could run. Reports later described it traveling at over 35 miles per hour. It destroyed everything in its path. Buildings crumbled under its weight. Horses were swept away. Carriages were crushed. People screamed as they tried to escape. But the molasses covered the streets like a tidal wave of darkness. Families clutched their children. Neighbors tried desperately to pull one another to safety. The streets became chaos incarnate, a blur of fear, sticky syrup, falling debris, and frantic shouts. Some people were caught and could not move. Molasses, thick and unrelenting, swallowed them. Others were swept along, flung against walls, dragged under overturned carts. It was a disaster unlike anything Boston had ever seen. Firefighters rushed to the scene, but there was little they could do. The molasses was too thick, too heavy. Hoses sprayed water, but the sticky substance resisted. Ordinary citizens became heroes. They formed human chains, pulled trapped neighbors, and risked their own lives to save strangers. Acts of courage emerged amidst horror. The death toll rose. 21 people lost their lives. Over 150 were injured. And the city was left covered in brown, sticky sludge that froze in the winter cold. Molasses seeped into homes, sidewalks, and railway tracks. The smell lingered for months, a grim reminder of that terrible day. Among the stories of tragedy were tales of extraordinary bravery. A young woman ran into the flood to save a child clinging to a cart. A fisherman waded through chest-deep molasses to pull a man trapped under debris. Neighbors worked tirelessly to rescue one another, demonstrating resilience, compassion, and the will to survive. In the chaos, the best and worst of humanity were on display. Fear, panic, courage, and hope all mingled in the brown tide. The aftermath was devastating. Investigators discovered that the tank had been poorly constructed. The steel was too thin, the foundation weak. The molasses, warmed by the winter sun and cooled rapidly by the night air, created a pressure the tank could not withstand. It was a disaster waiting to happen. Boston responded with determination. Cleanup crews worked for weeks to remove the molasses from streets and buildings. Bricks were repaired, streets washed, and families mourned their losses. Yet, the event left a permanent mark on the city, emotionally, physically, and historically. Over the years, the Great Molasses Flood became more than just a bizarre historical incident. It became a story about human courage and resilience, about ordinary citizens confronting extraordinary circumstances, about lives lost, heroes born, and communities coming together in the face of disaster. Children who survived would never forget the smell, the terror, or the frantic cries of that day. Adults carried the memory for the rest of their lives. And Boston itself remembered. The North End bears a small plaque today, honoring those who perished in the flood and celebrating the bravery of those who risked everything to save their neighbors. The disaster also became a lesson in engineering, oversight, and responsibility. Companies were held accountable. New regulations were implemented. But more importantly, it reminded the world that disasters, no matter how strange or improbable, could reveal the true character of people. Imagine standing on a Boston street on that January day. The wind biting your face, snow crunching underfoot, children laughing. Then the roar, the crack of steel, the brown waves sweeping toward you. Panic takes over. You clutch your loved ones. You run, slip, struggle, hope to survive. This was the reality for the citizens of Boston's North End. Yet, in the midst of chaos, humanity shone through. Neighbors helping neighbors. Strangers risking their lives. Firefighters battling impossible odds. And countless small acts of heroism unnoticed by history, but remembered by those who lived. The Great Molasses Flood reminds us of something timeless, even in the strangest disasters. Courage, empathy, and resilience can shine brighter than fear. Even when life seems ordinary, catastrophe can strike, revealing extraordinary character. And even in sticky, unimaginable circumstances, the human spirit can prevail. Today, walking the streets of Boston's North End, one might hardly notice the tragedy. Brick buildings stand. Streets are clean. The plaque quietly honors the past. But history remembers. And so do the stories of heroism, survival, and the sheer unpredictability of life. Because sometimes, history does not come in the form of wars or politics. Sometimes it arrives as a wave of molasses. And it teaches us that even in chaos, humanity matters. Even when the odds are impossible, courage finds a way. And even in the darkest, stickiest moments, hope can rise.